All right, let's get things rolling here. I don't want to hold everyone all morning. Um, so first, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We hope you find these helpful. My name is John Gestel. I'm our client relations coordinator here. So if you've engaged with Royalty Exchange, you've probably engaged with me at some point. With me today is Rob Bernhard. He is our corporate counsel. So he'll be answering any legal questions, things like that, contract questions. Um, Today, May 13th, is our office hours. We got a couple things we want to address specifically, and then we'll get into questions. Not a ton of submitted questions. So yeah, if you do have questions while we go through everything, as I said before, please submit it to the Q&A. It's a lot easier for us to manage that stuff. But we will dive right in here. The first thing we're going to talk about is the IFPI report, the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry. Every year they do a report on the music industry at large and how things look, and that came out just in April. We also keep a close eye out for the Goldman Sachs report, which I have not seen yet. Normally they release it in May sometime, so we'll see that one too. That one's called Music in the Air. Um, but the IFPI report is really comprehensive, has a lot of interesting stuff. Their main chart is the one you see here on the screen. Shows about 4.8% global growth in music industry revenue. Mostly driven by streaming, which everyone could probably have guessed. Um, but a lot of promising things, especially for royalty assets in particular, just because a lot of this stuff is driven by streaming. One thing that is notable on this, which is actually in the physical revenue, was down, which is a surprise. Just because there is a lot of allure towards vinyl, especially these days. Um, so interesting to see that, but everything else across the board is pretty flat or growing. So not a ton to report on that besides the streaming growth. Um, a couple of the key takeaways here is the top music markets, obviously US number one, Japan number two, UK number three. There's the top 10 there. You can see Mexico actually just broke into the top 10, which we'll kind of talk about for emerging markets. Streaming growth plus 9.5% growth in subscription streaming revenue, which is good. That's the higher royalty rate for the stream mechanical royalties from the CRB compared to the ad supported. So that's really, really positive. And then, yeah, the top emerging markets. Number one was the Middle East, North Africa, as they call it, MENA, which is 22.8% growth. Interesting. Have not seen that historically, so we'll kind of see how that works its way into royalty catalogs and earnings as far as regions go. Next, Sub-Saharan Africa, which we've seen at 22.6% growth, and then Latin America, 22.5% growth, which again, those are two that we've been keeping close eyes on. Another big one has been Indian markets. If I recall correctly, in their chart, it's around 8% growth. But they have a kind of much more comprehensive list on their report. If you haven't looked at it, I would recommend it. It is really in depth. There's some fluff in there, but yeah, there's a lot of good data to pull out of it. So I do recommend taking a look at that. Next, let's talk about the CRB. It's something we've focused on quite a bit the last couple of years, just because it is very relevant to royalty assets. We had been expecting these big catch-up payments from the rate increase, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. This is the official schedule that the MLC posts on their website. As you can see, there's really only one more block of payments to come for previously partially paid royalties. Um, from coming from Amazon specifically. So important here, these are mostly done. Um, about a year and a half ago, we were looking at what could these catch-up payments potentially look like, and we saw several assets that had really, really big bumps from these catch-up payments. Um, it seems they're largely done. Um, this most recent biannual distribution from major publishers may have had a few more payments in there. The next one may have some more as well, just as they kind of process everything and get it paid out. If you're looking at the raw data for an asset you own or an asset you're interested in, you'll want to look at the performance period for any payments in there, and that's going to kind of help you just determine whether or not they're from previously partially paid periods or unpaid periods, just because they'll be extending back to 2021. Between 2019 and 2021 is the kind of the time period in question. Um, Couple other notable things with the MLCs, the NMPA and Spotify battle. just because of they're always trying to negotiate royalty rates. The biggest thing that I've seen recently is around podcasts. Obviously, that's a huge revenue driver for Spotify, especially since they recently did their whole bundle everything together as a way of kind of circumventing general royalty rates to something a little bit less. But the NMPA is fighting them on that, and how podcasts use unlicensed music. So we'll keep our eyes on that and see how that goes. And then obviously AI usage as it relates to music is another big one. Um, just this week, actually, I was reading a report that the U.S. Copyright Office published a letter saying that AI companies do breach copyright laws. And then, as I understand it, there was some personnel changes, and the authors of those reports were let go from the Copyright Office, even though they were very, very senior. Um, so again, things we'll want to keep our eyes on as far as how AI factors into royalties in particular. Um, so we'll see. We'll see how all that develops. The AI issue is obviously a big one that a lot of publishers are very, very wary of. So there's a lot of preemptive legal posturing happening in the music space, but obviously something that we want to keep abreast of just as investors in royalties. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Next, we're going to look at a couple opportunities that are currently live on Royalty Exchange. The first one is one we're really excited about. This Jimmy Buffett catalog. There's both the publisher share and the songwriter share available. This is just a snapshot of the publisher one, but go take a look if you haven't already. This one's really compelling, and it is for the life of rights. Um, so yeah, this is a really, really great one. It's actually getting pretty close to a sale, so now is a good time to take a look at it. And then we also have one asset in Final Offers. Is a Post Malone catalog, which is pretty cool also. That one's got about 4 hours left. Um, but I always want to highlight that stuff just because they are active opportunities. And that's why we're all here for these opportunities. And that pretty much runs through everything that I had slated to talk about rather, on this webinar. We'll run through the submitted questions, of course, and then any additional questions that you all have. I see we already have one that's come through here. Adrian, we'll address this right now. Are there any tips for people who are new to this? Are there common mistakes people make when starting to invest, things we shouldn't do? Um, that's a big question. Um, the best answer I can give you for general questions about getting started is to look at our ultimate guide to buying royalties. It's actually a free download on Royalty Exchange. And that will get into a lot of the common mistakes, pitfalls, things you should focus on, shouldn't focus on as far as royalty assets go. Um, so take a look at that. That's going to be a huge help to you. Um, and then I would also say, watch a few listings and kind of see how they move and how the offers behave and how people kind of engage with that stuff. That will also help you. Um, beyond that, I would say just get started. Um, make an offer, see how the system works. Um, yeah, that will also help you kind of get acclimated to everything.
I
Okay,
just put a link to the ultimate guide and the answer to that question.
perfect. Yeah, that's going to be your best resource for getting started, without a doubt. We just re-authored it last fall, so it's pretty new, pretty updated, but it will have a lot of good info for you. Okay, so we'll get into these submitted questions now. There's only about 23 of them, so we got them pretty quick. Um, Starting with this first one here, if my investment decreases in value, do I have the right to complain to the SEC? Well, since these aren't securities, I'll say no, but Rob, you want to provide some color to that one?
Yeah, that's right. So what the assets on Royalty Exchange are a one-to-one assignment of an income right due from a contract. So it's not a security. Really, what you are investing in is your ability to determine what a good price is for the catalog by looking at the past performance. And of course, past performance is not an indication of future results, but the more that you kind of learn about the royalty streams and different types of assets, and you can kind of project out your own decay curve. So what you're really doing is you're investing in the right to the future income based on what you think the value of that would be going forward.
Perfect. Next one here, any case studies you could share about success stories? Yeah, there's a whole bunch. I mean, a high profile one is the Empire State of Mind catalog. Obviously, everyone knows that song by Jay-Z. That one's always sold for a 10-year term, and I mean, it's done super well for the individuals who own that one. But we see tons of success stories, things that just take off. Um, yeah, it happens all the time. You could actually probably go find some of them if you find the listing of it. You could go see how it was when it first sold. We always have the links to prior sales on any relisted asset. You can just go compare. So you should be able to find a bunch. We also
Some
on our
some
blog
things that
page.
that contribute to big jumps, John.
Mhm.
Things called synchronization. That
Yeah.
means when a song gets licensed for use in particularly a movie, TV show, video game, those are one-time payments, so they're not like a typical streaming royalty that pays out on a regular basis. It's really just a one-time license, and depending on the song and the usage, sometimes those those licenses can go for a big chunk of money. So that'd be one way that, kind of funds that you wouldn't necessarily expect could pop up in the future. And then, if it gets in a popular movie, then maybe people want to stream it more. We've seen that a handful of times.
Oh
Those are
yeah.
kind of they're hard to predict, obviously, because they're not a regular occurrence, but those are things we've seen. One thing that we've seen new with certainly social media apps, like songs that become viral on TikTok. We've seen huge bounces for those. Again, really hard to predict those things, but I think the more you see that type of thing happen with a certain song, it seems like it's more likely to happen in the future. Again, really hard to predict, but those are things that can really provide some big uplift outside of just the general market and increase of streaming that Sean or that John showed in the
Yeah.
report earlier.
Yeah, the TikTok one in particular is really significant. I mean, there's one catalog we were admitting for that had a viral TikTok hit. It was paying monthly and it was like 2,000 bucks a month, and then suddenly it was 20,000 a month. So, literally 10x on a monthly basis while it was viral on TikTok. So really significant. But a lot of these success stories on our blog page actually will do write-ups. Um, it's kind of a lot to go through there, but you can definitely find a bunch of success stories through that. So if you're curious. Um, Next question here. What is a modest budget to start investing with? Ask an artist what is the best way to get my catalog on this platform. For starting, I mean, it really depends on what you can afford and what you're willing to put towards royalties. Um, General rule of thumb on the low end, you should expect royalty assets to transact in like the $5,000 to $10,000 range, but it totally depends on the catalog. That's just generally what we see on the low end. You may find a few below that, but it's pretty unusual. Um, that's normally a good range for someone looking to dip a toe in. Um, could we get historical artists to invest in? What determines the music that we can buy the royalties from? Um, yeah, you could definitely get historical artists. I mean, I just showed the Jimmy Buffett catalog. It's 30-year-old catalog. Um, as far as who determines what music is included, that's up to the seller of the rights and what they have and what they want to sell. So they dictate a lot of that stuff. We'll obviously walk them through, you know, value and, help them kind of build the listing and include things that will be compelling. But ultimately, it's up to them. It's their asset. What they want to sell is, their decision. Next one here. How does this work? What am I actually buying? You kind of answered that already, Rob, with the first question. I don't know if you want to add any additional color to that, but
Yeah, I guess really just to reiterate in very basic terms, what you are buying is the right to a future royalty income. Those are based on in for the most part on royalty exchanges, music copyrights. We do other kinds of intellectual property as well. You're not actually buying the right to the copyright. You're just buying the right to one creator, or if in the case that it's been purchased before, the underlying right to the royalty stream itself. Typically, the copyrights are controlled or owned by either a label or a publisher. They're the ones that are tasked with going out and issuing licenses, collecting money, and really this is a passive income um, right that we're offering here on the website, and it's really not Royalty Exchange that offers. It's whoever owns the right is listing it on the marketplace, and Royalty Exchange is the marketplace that helps facilitate transaction.
Yep. Perfect. I got another submitted question here. Why do some offerings not have a median listed? Good question, actually. So a couple different reasons could contribute to why a listing doesn't have a median. First would be non-music assets because they are a bit more esoteric. So, for example, the Listerine stuff, it's not going to have a median on it. Also, typically production music catalogs, things that aren't like organically listened to. We won't include a median on those typically, or like a fixed return structured asset won't have a median on it, or something that's too young. One of the parameters for generating the median is it needs to have a 3-year earning average as well as an LTM, which stands for last 12 months. It's because the median is dictated by the lower of those two. So if something doesn't have 3 years worth of historical data for us to put up, then it won't qualify for a median calculation. Um, so I think that's all of them. Rob, can you think of any other reasons why that wouldn't be a median? There might be one or two, but those are the big ones.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much covers it.
Yeah, but that's generally why you would see that. Okay, next question here. What's the ARR? Do you hold songs that have not yet been released? What are your biggest sold royalty assets to date? Um, we don't include things that haven't been released generally, just because a prerequisite of building a listing is it needs to have historical royalty earnings. If a catalog has tracks in it that aren't yet earning, they could be included. So it's possible, but generally speaking, we need to see royalty income flowing from a property before we'll list it. Um, yeah, if someone wanted to include a wired catalog, we could sometimes include that stuff, but it's important that there is cash flow. As far as biggest sold royalty assets to date, Rob, I mean, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say the largest single transactions we've done have been right around 1 million. We've done a handful of those. We've done about 7 years ago, we did three private placements that got into the $2 or $3 million range. Our average is probably around 100K. Um, Sometime, we get well into the six figures. Not often do we see $1 million or more catalogs, but that's kind of been the top of the range that
Yeah,
we've seen from a one-to-one sale.
yeah, they do come up though, and we had one what last month, right? One for
Right,
900 something.
right.
Yeah, there might be one that was, or a couple that were over 1 million, but yeah. Okay, next question's here. What other risks investors overlook in royalty assets? How do you gauge a catalog's long-term earning potential? Risks that investors overlook. Um, that's a tough question. There are a couple. I would say what an artist is actively doing can be one. That could also be a positive, but it can also be a negative. Um, we always advise investors do their own due diligence beyond what we can offer. All we can offer are the facts of the earnings. But there are outside factors that can contribute to a catalog success, such as what's happening with the artist. So that's one I would say. Um, as far as gauging long-term earning potential, the biggest one there I would point to is sources of revenue, and understanding what sources contribute to a catalog based on what the catalog is. So a common thing we talk about with this in particular is radio, for example, right? Radio inherently for a younger catalog is going to be a short-lived earning uh, source. That's generally because radio circulation and radio lifespan for new catalogs is short because it's a new song. Radios will play it a lot. It'll have a big spike in the early life, and then that will decay. However, for older catalogs, things like 10 plus years old, if there's a significant radio contribution, that's likely going to be more consistent. Reasons for that are the song has cemented its place in music history in some form. Say it was a big hit from, the early 2000s, so it gets regular airplay on, you know, hits from the early 2000s, which aren't going to change. Or if it's, got a specific place in a genre. We saw this quite a bit with the catalog I sold recently for Doug Stone, actually. Had a significant radio contribution, mostly satellite radio, but significant radio contribution because it got regular airplay in country music radio. Um, then other sources like streaming, use case, if it's a production music catalog, different uses will have different earnings life. For example, if you have a song that's placed in, a syndicated TV show that gets regular replays like Friends or something like that, that's going to be much more consistent than something that's, the theme song for the NBA in 2020. That's not going to get nearly as much replay value as Friends is. So things like that. Again, a lot of this stuff would be addressed in the Ultimate Guide, so that would be a good place to look to kind of wrap your head around it. But then, just understanding how the music ecosystems work will answer a lot of that question. Next question here. How is the value of a royalty stream decided? Standard royalty investment term. How do I withdraw profit? Turnaround time. Okay, a lot in there. How is the value of a royalty stream decided? Well, we like to let the markets decide. So it's really up to you all and how you evaluate it. We like to compare against other investment options like treasury bonds, things like that. Um, but yeah, ultimately it's up to you and what you think is going to do with it, just like you would with any other asset. Standard royalty investment term, I would say life of rights, just the most common. But we have a couple different term options that we offer, some limited term. But most are going to be for life of rights. How do I withdraw profit? Just collect your royalties every day or every month or quarter or whatever, whenever it pays out. You could also resell. We have a pretty robust resale market, and we've seen a lot of success through that. Remember that you can resell a life and rights asset for probably a similar multiple you paid for it, and then have the revenue collected on top of that. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Turnaround time. Turnaround time depends. Um, Mostly it actually depends on the royalty payor, believe it or not. Some companies are really fast with turning around all the paperwork that we need to get stuff paying correctly, and some are really slow. We had one that took over a year before we got final confirmations from the royalty payor. So it can take a pretty long time. Um, and yeah, it will vary quite a bit.
And
Uh,
John, just to add a little color on kind of how it works after the fact.
yeah.
So when you purchase an asset on Royalty Exchange facilitates the paperwork with the seller. We also send the assignment documentation to the distributor, and Royalty Exchange becomes the administrator of payments. So the distributor will pay Royalty Exchange, and then Royalty Exchange passes those payments through to the investor within 30 days of when we receive it. So if it's a quarterly paying asset, we'll receive the payment and process that within 30 days. I think our typical turnaround time is around 10 days. But that's kind of how the turnaround on the payments works. So the payments come from the distributor to Royalty Exchange and then go out to the investor via direct deposit. We have a payment portal that we onboard people to when they purchase the first asset. So that's kind of how it works at the end of a transaction.
Um, a couple submitted questions here. We'll run through these really quick. First one, there's a Latin music fixed return listing on the site right now. Can you talk through how that would work and why the party listing it would do it? Good question. That's going to be the Aguanta Corazon Regional Mexican Publishing Royalties, I assume. Um, Yeah, so basically how this would work is there's a fixed payback amount that you would collect as the buyer of this royalty stream. In this case, it's $110,000 that you would collect from these royalties. So you are paying to collect that. It's kind of like a standard advance, like an artist would see in the music industry, which is probably one of their motivations for why they want to do it. It's a structure they're really familiar with, and they get the royalties back at a certain point. Now, we do offer a bunch of different options to artists when they do want to sell. So it's kind of up to them. There may be cases where we will require a fixed return listing um, for whatever reason to mitigate risk for an investor, or if that's a requirement from the royalty payor as far as what they'll allow. So there could be something like that. I don't know the case of this one in particular, um, but there could be a lot of motivations for it. For this one, I'm going to assume that they want it back at some point, but I don't know offhand. Um, Rob, anything else you would add to that one in particular?
No, I think just basically it mirrors what's a common transaction in the music industry of getting advance.
Yeah,
So I think that is probably what's driving it.
yeah, it's
Um,
comfortable for them.
right. That's right.
Yeah, that's likely why. Um, Next one here, Jerome, good to see you. When are ASCAP catalogs going to be available as life of rights instead of 30-year term? Good question. This is actually determined by a couple different things that are a bit outside of our control. So ASCAP has limitations on what they will allow for a life of rights sale. Um, and that will be different between a publisher's share versus a songwriter's share of royalties. Um, for the songwriter's share, they will not allow a life of rights assignment for a catalog that's generating less than, I think it's $20,000 a year. Rob, is that the line?
If a songwriter makes less than 25K, they don't allow
25K.
them to do an irrevocable assignment.
Right.
So then otherwise we just have them do an assignment for a term. It's kind of really our call, and we haven't really revisited that since we initially came up with the 30-year term. But yeah, no real plans to change anything on that end.
Yeah. So that's kind of our way of circumventing their limitation there, so we can still offer the royalties. You'll only see that for ASCAP songwriter share, publisher share won't have that. So you can see ASCAP life of rights for those. And then some people request 30-year listings. I, I think that they just want some guarantee they'll get it back at some point. So some people request it. It's not super common, but they do. So sometimes you'll see those if it's a non-ASCAP asset, if it's a 30-year term, that normally means it was specifically requested. Um, yeah, so that's ASCAP. Next here, what does it mean when a new listing says that it will be automatically added to the exchange? What if a buyer doesn't want to relist? Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to relist it, that's no problem. Just tell us. Our general policy is that we'll automatically relist assets on the sites that you, as a royalty asset owner, have liquidity options. I mean, what if you bought something and then, the day after you bought it, someone offered you, 5 times what you paid for it? That's a great opportunity that you wouldn't want to miss out on just because you didn't want the listing up. So that's really why, just to make sure that you have more options for your listing. You're not obligated to sell by having your listing up there, but it does open you up to potential offers that, could be attractive. Um, so if you don't want to list it, just let us know. We'll take it down for you. Um, we would encourage you to leave it up because you never know, but it's up to you. Okay. And then the last submitted one here. Due to the high tax rate on royalties, thinking ownership could be in an IRA. How hard is it to change ownership when I die to my wife, and or if my kids needed to take ownership as an IRA distribution to meet IRA requirements? For our purposes, changing ownership for the administration is super easy. We just send you a short form letter of direction. You sign off on it. We reroute the royalties to wherever you want. As far as estate planning, just handle it like you would any other asset that you own. Um, you just have to let us know, hey, send the royalties here now. If it's estate stuff, we may have to do some diligence to make sure it's legitimate, make sure that someone's not stealing it. But yeah, it's really straightforward for us. I mean, Rob, anything you want to add to that specifically? It's
No, it's easy for us from a paperwork standpoint, but obviously we can't give any, estate planning advice or IRA. We don't have any expertise in that, so I think that's a better question for the IRA,
yeah,
as far as as minimum distributions or anything like that.
yeah. Question here. Is there a list of royalty payors you can't work with due to assignment issues? I mean, we keep one internally, but they're all maybes, really. I'm not sure there's anyone that we outright can't work with. I mean, there's a handful of companies that like don't allow assignments. That's outside of us. Um, some have pretty stringent rules, like Sound Exchange, for example. You need to be earning like $25,000 in the last 12 months, and you need to be the named artist on the catalog or something crazy like that before they'll allow for assignments. Some international performers' rights organizations won't honor assignments. Like, for example, SOCAN, which is Canada's. To do an assignment, you have to go through their board of directors and get specific approval for it. Um, I mean, for us, it's more of a hey, we're happy to look and see. But there are some companies out there that won't allow it. We don't have like a formal list, really, because we're always trying to bring more into the fold. So we don't really like to say no, we can't work with them until we do an investigation and see what we can do. Uh, Next one, can you discuss the admin fee rate that Royalty Exchange earns for administrating the payments for investors? We do not take a fee. So yeah, happy to discuss it. Our admin service is a free service we offer. Um, Now, that being said, um, as some of you may know, for international payments or for currency conversion, there's a fee that's outside of our control. So, like for example, if we're getting royalties from Sony UK and they're paying in GBP, that comes to us, that's going to have a currency conversion knock on it. Um, but yeah, for us to actually admin it, no fee. We waive that fee as part of our terms of use, which you can read on the site. It's all pretty open and transparent there. Okay, cool. Next, back to these submitted questions here. Is there a limit to investments per quarter? Nope. The limit is what you can afford. If you want to buy 100 assets and you can pay for all of them, by all means, do it. We'd love to see it. What is the yield range when buying royalties? What are the main pitfalls when analyzing a royalty? Well, we've already kind of talked about pitfalls a little bit. As far as yield range, again, that's really up to you and what your portfolio wants. Most people want to get like probably 10%. Right now, our site-wide average is around 12.5%. I think the last time I calculated it. I do a recalculation of ongoing performance about every 6 months or so. So that would have been back in January that I did that. Um, yeah, so around there is what most people go for, but ultimately it's up to you and what you want. I mean, the yield range is 0.01% to 6 trillion% because someone, sold something 2 days after they bought it for a profit. And so the annualized calculation comes out to, some insane percentage. Um, so yeah, the range is huge. It's really up to you what you pay and what you get and how you handle it. Are you open to partnerships? I suppose. That depends on the partnership. Um, I say this not infrequently, but nothing's a no until we have a conversation about it. Obviously, if it's advantageous for everyone, we're happy to consider, but can't make any promises or guarantees. So, when it comes to investing in music royalties, is it likely that investors go off personal music preferences or research based? Our advice is look at the numbers. The math, if the math makes sense, then the asset should make sense. Royalties are pretty unique in that if there are earnings, then there is a market for it. It's not always the case with other assets, but it is with royalties. Now, that being
We've
said,
seen the flip side.
yeah,
We've seen it.
yeah, that being said, lots of people go off personal music preferences, whether it's because it's familiarity with the market, um, or there's some kind of vanity aspect to it and they like it. I mean, like one famous story that we had is one guy bought a catalog because um, it was a gift for his daughter's wedding, and he bought it for her because like their song was in the catalog, right? And like that, did he overpay for it? Maybe. Is it a really cool, nice gesture? Yeah, of course. So in that case, yeah, he bought it for personal music preferences. Um, so we see it all, honestly. Ultimately, it's up to you, as with any of these investing questions. Like it's up to you and what you are trying to get accomplished. Um, for us, we like to look at the numbers. That's why on every listing you have all the financial breakdown, all the raw data is there. We break out all the finances because ultimately it is an investment. Um, but yeah, that doesn't change the facts for some people. So next one here. What is the outlook for streaming in general? Very, very positive, especially with the size of the emerging markets that are seem to be uh, blossoming. Um, I mean, close to 10% growth to this day, year over year in subscription streaming revenue is massive. More people are adopting streaming every day, and so it's only up as far as we can tell. I will say that, it is starting to flatten a little bit, the growth. Um, but still, I mean, there's just so much opportunity globally that yeah, it's hard to ignore. Okay, next one here. Can you see financial data going back 10 years? If we have it, we provide all the data that we have available, all the earnings data that we can. So if we have data going back 10 years, you will have earnings data going back 10 years. If we have it going back 20 years, you'll have it going back 20 years. Um, it's not always the case that we have that. Actually, many companies don't offer data going back that far. Like, for example, many publishers will only offer like 3 years historical in some cases. I think PROs will offer like 10, maybe. Um, yeah, so it kind of depends on the payor and what we get access to. Um, if we have it, you have it. So that's kind of how we work.
And the data that's presenting on the listings always comes directly from the payor of the royalties. Not It's not self-reported by the seller. We always connect with directly with who is paying the royalties to get
Yep.
the historical earnings. So if they have it, we get it and it's posted.
Yep. Um, next one here. Do you compare the yields of royalties with U.S. Treasury yields, and how do you offset the effect of high inflation in royalties? Yeah, good questions. We do compare them, um, but they serve different purposes in a portfolio. The treasury yields will be lower, but obviously a safer investment, whereas royalties will be higher but hold a little more risk. I mean, they have different places and different functions, um, both valuable. But if you're looking at an old catalog that's really consistent, yeah, using a treasury as a bouncing off point to kind of compare your yield is definitely a good way to go. Um, but yeah, I mean, you want to have a balanced portfolio, right? Obviously. So having a bit of everything is always good. And then how do you offset the effect of high inflation in royalties? Yeah, that's a good question. On principle, I would say that royalties will work in tandem with inflation, just because, for example, streaming revenue, let's talk about streaming mechanicals, is derived from revenue from DSPs like Spotify, Apple Music. So assuming that they are adjusting their pricing for inflation, the royalties will also adjust in pricing for inflation because it's a percentage of their revenue. Um, so it should kind of work itself out. Um, and then obviously there's entities like ASCAP and BMI, which are regularly monitored by larger institutions. So, that's kind of built into it. Um, yeah, so that would be my answer. Rob, I don't know if you have anything you want to kind of add to that, but it should kind
No,
of work out, just because it's a percentage of revenue. So, another question here. If an owner has not been active for, say, 30 or 90 days, do you notify them of a bid? Yeah, they get notified every time there's a bid on their listing. Unless for some reason there's some opt-out somewhere, they should get notified. Um, but yeah, what they want to do with those, it's up to them. Um, if you're not seeing any traction, I mean, you could reach out to us and we can approach them for you if you want. I've had varying degrees of success with that for people, as far as getting a deal accomplished. So if you want, let me know. Just, full disclosure, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Um, But yeah, we can do that for you. Otherwise, normally the best communication method is directly through the listing, make an offer, and see what happens. And if they don't respond or they reject it, that kind of is an answer in its own right. Um, yeah. Next question here. Under Section 203 of the Copyright Act, a songwriter can reclaim their copyright after 35 years. Can life of rights royalties be reclaimed? Great question. And we actually have some recent legal precedent about this. Rob, you want to talk about the Sonny and Cher thing?
Yeah, so the question gets at it's called copyright termination. Um, Section 203 of the Copyright Act gives if you assign your copyrights, you get basically a second bite at the apple 35 years later to terminate that copyright assignment. And really, kind of the implication for that is maybe when you sign your original recording or publishing deal you didn't have the kind of stature that would allow you to get a good deal. You may have been taken advantage of by your publisher. It really gives you a chance as a songwriter to terminate that original publishing deal where you assigned your copyrights to a publisher and allow you to go find a new administration deal, a new publishing deal. That's really kind of the impetus for where that came from. It does not apply to assignments of royalty streams. So since every asset on Royalty Exchange is an assignment of a royalty stream and not the assignment of an underlying copyright, there's no ability for if your seller, if an asset you purchased is the songwriter, they cannot terminate the royalty assignment. And like John said, it was about a year ago or so. This actually went up to the court, and Sonny Bono's wife tried to use the termination provision to terminate a contractual assignment of royalties to Cher. And ultimately, they decided like this was not an assignment of copyright; it was an assignment of the royalty stream itself, which is a contractual right. So the copyright termination provision would not apply there. So that kind of affirmed what we always knew is that since the royalty stream is not the copyright itself, then it would not be subject to that assignment provision, termination provision. Sorry.
Yeah. An official precedent too, which is really nice. Okay. Next question here. Can you share any progress in being able to provide reporting and payments in non-US currency for payors that aren't US based? Not yet, unfortunately. Not yet. We are starting to add in the currency conversion rates on statements. So we're getting better, but as far as making non-US payments, still kind of a hurdle. We're actively looking at it all the time with our payment partner to see how we might be able to do it, but it is slow going, and I have unfortunately no timeline on that one. But always top of mind. So hopefully I can give you guys some news on that in the future, but I don't know yet. Next question here. Do your expectations for the music market and macroeconomic conditions suggest needed changes to cost of capital assumptions? That is a good question, and it relates to a lot of different possible things to consider, especially on the macroeconomic side. Obviously, tariffs is something that everyone's considering, and what does that look like? So far, there hasn't been anything for music, though just the other day I did see that a proposed tariff for international films. Is that kind of like cracks the door on intellectual property and what that could look like? We haven't seen anything yet that I'm aware of, so I don't know. As far as cost of capital assumptions, I mean, I would just look at interest rates and use that, and obviously weigh that into your investment decisions for royalty assets. But with the growth of the music market generally, I mean that's a good sign. And then yeah, presumably interest rates will go down at some point, and then that's something to consider. But yeah, I would say like definitely reanalyze it just because things are moving quickly in the world, and just good to have a handle on it. Yeah, we're not financial advisors, so I can only offer so much here. But that would be my recommendation. Robbie, anything you want to add to that?
No, no.
Looking for a wider range of offerings. What could be done about that? I mean, I don't have much to offer there. I mean, we put up as much as we can, as much as we're comfortable putting up. We turn down a lot of deals because they fail at due diligence for whatever reason. Right now, what was it, Rob? Like about a deal a day. It works out to about 30 a month, something like that.
Yep. Plus everything that's on the secondary market as well.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, our deal flow is about as robust as you can get. I believe we have the most deal flow of any place anywhere for royalty catalogs. So yeah, we're doing all we can. As we continue to grow, we can feasibly expect that we'll get more to offer, but yeah, it is a process. Next, last question here. How I can invest in the Christian music industry? Well, we have plenty of Christian music catalogs, so I'd say go find one of those and buy it. That's the best that I could offer there. Christian music catalogs are actually pretty common. We see them not infrequently. So you'll likely see more. And yeah, there's definitely a few that are up right now. So yeah, that opportunity is there for you.
And you can use the filter and search features in our current and past deals.
Yep.
Most pretty much every deal has a bunch of different tags on it, and Christian music is certainly one of them. So if you want to use the search feature on the marketplace, that can help you narrow down not just genre, type, term length, median. There's a lot of different tools you can use to kind of hone down if you're looking for something specific.
Yeah. Text search is definitely a good way to go for that. Okay. So that covers the submitted questions. We've addressed all of your questions live today. Do you guys have any last questions that you wanted to touch on before we conclude here? Otherwise, say thanks for all for stopping by. Have a good rest of your day. I'll give you all a minute to think it over and type stuff out because it takes a second to type. Um, yeah, so take a minute or two here. If nothing else, then yeah, we'll conclude this webinar. Yeah, you're very welcome, Adrian. If you have other questions, reach out. Investors at royaltyexchange.com. We can even schedule a call if you want to talk through stuff a bit more specifically. Uh, so let us know that's attractive. I have those calls not infrequently. You're
Yeah,
very, very
thanks
welcome.
everyone for your time and thoughtful questions. It always makes these things better when we have engagement from the attendees.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Okay. Going once, going twice. Cool. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. If there's anything else we can help with, investors at royaltyexchange.com. I have been John Gestel. This has been Rob Bernhard. Thank you again. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.